Welcome to the Tyler's Place podcast. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards. As many of you no doubt realize, Brother Jeff Maynor was conspicuously absent from the Tyler's Place podcast in the month of August. Generally speaking, he handles the VMAP Minute for us. I always look forward to chatting with him, but Brother Jeff has been otherwise occupied because, as most of you realize, he's from the Valley of Baton Rouge, and Baton Rouge really just suffering right now after historic flooding. And it's taken a little time to get Jeff on the phone. I'm happy to report he's doing well, and we're going to chat with him right now and get the update of everything that's happening with all of our friends and certainly our brothers, the widows, and all of our friends and family there in Baton Rouge and the areas around Baton Rouge that were affected by the flooding, and get an update on what's happening with the Scottish Rite and the lodges there and so on and so forth. Right off the bat, I'm going to apologize for the audio quality. This was a situation where I was in one place, Jeff was in another, and, might not get another opportunity to talk because the man has got quite a lot on his hands right this moment in time. So just taped it right where we were standing, so I'm going to apologize for that in the beginning, and hopefully you'll be able to get all the information. And if you miss anything, you need information on where you can help, Jeff's going to mention all of that in the upcoming interview, but you can send me an email right now at podcast@scottishrite.org, and I will forward all of the relevant information to you pretty much instantly. So thanks so much, and without further ado, from Baton Rouge, and actually from a flooded lodge, I talk with Brother Jeff Maynor on the Tyler's Place podcast special edition.
First of all, I'm going to apologize to everybody for the sound quality of this particular set of interviews. As we record this, it's around 11:30 Eastern Time, and on Saturday, the 20th of August. I'm being joined by Brother Jeff Maynor. I am actually on the streets of Baltimore having a little day with the kids, but I had a chance to chat with Jeff, and Jeff, as many of you know, he's our VMAP committee chairman, but also he is a member of the Valley of Baton Rouge, and there is no doubt that you have seen the news coverage of the situation there. So first of all, Jeff, thank you for taking a couple of minutes to talk with us this morning. I have to start right out. You and your family, everybody high and dry?
Everybody in my family is high and dry. We were fortunate that we weren't impacted at all by the flooding, and so I've been able to do a little running around and help those who have.
Well, let's start at the beginning. If you could, just for folks who have maybe not kept their nose to this, I'm going to apologize for any background noise anybody hears. Give us a little timeline of what has occurred there in Baton Rouge and that part of Louisiana. Like, I guess you call it central Louisiana?
Yes, sure. It's not really central. It's more south central, but
okay.
It's been so starting Thursday, the 10th, I believe, maybe the 11th. We started to have a pretty good amount of rain here in Baton Rouge, and the front actually just stalled over the Baton Rouge area. And it just kept raining, and it kept raining, and the Amite River filled up, and the Comite River filled up, and they started backflowing into all these lazy streams that go through people's neighborhoods. There was a graphic on one of the news networks that during the 3-day period that it rained here, one of the small towns north of Baton Rouge received 32 inches of rain, which is more rain than the city of Los Angeles has received in the last 4 years. So just to give you an idea of the amount of rain that was falling on this area, and as those rivers flooded, the benchmark for flooding around here is a 1983 flood that was a record. We beat it by 3.5 feet this time. So the rivers were 3.5 feet above their record flood stage. People who, their houses are 100 years old, they've never flooded. They got 2-3 feet of water in their house.
Wow.
It's just been, it really just, they called it a once-in-a-thousand-year rain event. It was that unlikely that we would get that amount of rain in the period that we got.
So now here we are just over a week later, and obviously we've all seen some of the news footage and things. From your perspective, boots on the ground, how are things there now? How is the weather? How are folks? I mean, we have had some loss of life, but I mean, I guess the thing we would compare it to at this point, just based on geography and history, is just about 10 years ago with Katrina, and obviously that's a little farther southeast over in New Orleans. But give us can you compare and contrast where we are now?
Well, Katrina was just a massive loss of life in addition to property, and we've been fortunate, thanks to the efforts of an amazing group of volunteer people who they heard about the flooding. They came from all over the state. They brought their boats. You've probably heard to them referred on the news coverage as the Cajun Navy. And these volunteers just would go through neighborhoods looking for people, looking for animals, looking for anybody that needed help. And so fortunately, I think we've only had 11 deaths from this flooding, which is remarkable when you consider that somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30,000 people have been displaced out of their homes by this event. The National Guard was going everywhere with their high water trucks. You had guys in boats, the sheriff's deputies. I talked to one brother yesterday when I went to visit him. He was working at his house, and he got moved 4 times. They evacuated. They went to a friend's house they thought would be safe based off past flooding history. It started to come there. They came and got evacuated again. They got taken to a shelter. The shelter got surrounded by floodwaters, so they got taken out of there again. And he's got a seriously handicapped daughter, and he said that the National Guard guys and the volunteers were just, they were so caring and so great with her and getting them in and out of the places that they needed to go. So you can't say enough about the spirit of community, that people have come together and helped each other out, opened their doors, opened their wallets, opened their hearts. It's really been a remarkable show of community by the state of Louisiana in this.
Well, one of the reasons I did want to speak to you is that we've had a lot of brothers reach out. You know, they know that you and I are friendly. They obviously know your role in VMAP, and they know we've got a great valley there in Baton Rouge and a really strong Masonic history throughout the state of Louisiana. And, you know, every Mason I know is asking the same question. How are lodges? How are the brothers? What can we do? So, first of all, in terms of any brothers that you know of, have any been particularly hard hit? Are there some that we need to be more concerned about than others? Where are we there?
So we're still, you know, we're less than a week from people really understanding and being able to get back in their houses. So we're still tracking down brothers. We know we're developing a list where people can get in touch with us, let us know what they need. I went and visited with a brother yesterday. I asked him, you know, how much water did you get in your house? And he said, well, I had about 6 inches in my attic. So just to give you an idea of how much water he had. 6 inches in his attic. So he's clearly, you know, his house has just been devastated.
Sure.
He's got 2 young daughters. His wife is ill. So, you know, we've taken care of him, at least his immediate needs. The Northern Masonic jurisdiction has been great. They sent us what they said was basically a down payment on future aid, and they sent us $20,000 to distribute to brothers to take care of their immediate needs: food, clothing, shelter, medicine. You know, get those key essentials off their minds so they don't have to worry about those, and they can kind of focus on the bigger picture of, you know, where do they go, what do they do with their house. So we've got a list developing. We're trying to keep track of people. In terms of lodges, most of the lodges in the Baton Rouge area were flooded or impacted by this. I'm actually standing in what was Milford Lodge's meeting room right now. They had about 2.5 feet of water in their lodge building. It's a small old lodge. It's about half a mile away from Bayou Manchac, which flooded more than 4 feet above its record level during the flooding. So they've clearly been displaced and impacted by that. We're over here ripping out sheetrock and carpet and things like that today to try and see what we can salvage of the building. Right now, from a charity perspective, we're really more worried about, we got to find all of our brothers. We got to find all of our widows. We have to find the ones that were displaced into a shelter. You know, one of the problems with an older membership is typically what you had for contact information is their house and their home phone. And if they're not in their house, we're having trouble finding them. So we're hoping that as people kind of, you know, come out of the shelters and land with friends and family, we can make sure that everybody's okay and find out what they need.
Well, is there a way that any of the brethren here can assist that? I mean, if we have contact information, friends, family, etc., or is it best that we just kind of hang tight and get ready to pitch in when you ask?
Well, there's a couple of things that we need. If you do have friends, family, contact information for brothers in Louisiana, you can send them to me. My email address is jmaynor@alumni.lsu.edu.
And I'll place a link to that in this podcast feed so guys can just click and hit.
Yeah, so if you know somebody down here, if you've got contact, if you heard from them, if they're in the Baton Rouge area, let me know. And if it's somebody who's already on our list, I'll check them off as a good contact. If it's not somebody who's on our list, I'll get them added to the list. The second thing we could use, of course, is dollars. I mean, that's the thing that's the easiest to relieve brothers' current distress is, you know, here's $500. Don't worry about having to buy food for a couple of weeks. Worry about your house.
Right.
Right now, from a Scottish Rite perspective, we're asking that all of the donations come through the Louisiana Scottish Rite Foundation. and that would be P.O. Box 64, Shreveport, Louisiana, 71161. And you can just mark attention flood relief on it, mail them a check. We're going to work on getting an online donation system going, but right now the easiest thing to do is just mail the Scottish Rite Foundation a check. They'll get it to us, and we'll get it to the brothers in need. And the third thing we could use is, hey, if you're bored, if you're off work, if you're retired, and you want to take a trip to Louisiana and pitch in helping people's houses, we could really use some bodies and some manpower. I know there are some volunteers who are already planning on coming down from some of the northern states, Illinois, Indiana. We're setting up a camping area for them at the local shrine temple, which stayed dry during the flooding. So if you're interested in coming down, shoot me an email at that email address, and we will find you a place to stay, and we will definitely find you some brothers who desperately need some help in their houses to come to work.
And
as we get past...
hang on one second. I just want to let everybody know, instead of taking notes, guys, if you're listening, you can shoot me an email. It's easy to remember, podcast@scottishrite.org. I'm going to have like a form email ready to go. Anybody that emails me looking for any of the information Jeff just put out there, I will get it back to you within, you send it, I'll get it back to you within about 30 seconds. So so for guys who are trying to write that down while they're listening to this maybe on the road or something, I'll make it easy for them. Just hit podcast@scottishrite.org. I'll make sure all that stuff gets written down so we can get help to where it's needed. Sorry, Jeff, didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that's all right. We definitely don't want people, fumbling for a pen while driving. The other thing I was going to say is, as we start to get a better idea of exactly, how the lodges were impacted and what people need in terms of beyond those immediate needs of food, clothing, shelter, and medicine, we'll start to put a list together of what else that's needed or what else lodges can use. And, if you've got extra this or extra that and want to send them to a lodge down here that lost everything, we'll set up a system for that later. But right now we really want to focus on those immediate needs for those brothers. I can tell you the Baton Rouge Scottish Rite had about 3.5 feet of water in it.
Wow. And that's such a beautiful building.
Yeah, it was not pretty when we opened the doors yesterday and met with the insurance adjusters. It was really hard to just look in there and shake your head. We were able to save some stuff already, just go in there and say, hey, look, it didn't get wet back here. Let's take all this stuff out. But there's definitely going to be a long-term rebuilding process for that. We're going to be displaced. We actually were supposed to have our spring reunion a week from today, or our fall reunion, I guess, a week from today. So we've postponed that. We're going to be looking for a different date to do that and come back strong with our reunion. But for now, we're going to...
Yeah, I think now is a good time to remember, a lodge is a number of brethren duly assembled. It doesn't have a single thing to do with any particular building or structure. It's all about the men and the brotherhood and being together. And, even without the building, the lodge persists. So while it's sad to lose those buildings, I think it's a good time for all of us to realize those buildings don't have a whole heck of a lot to do with what we do as brothers, other than the fact that the place to make new Masons and put on our costumes and go play Freemason. But other than that, Freemasonry is what happens outside the lodge, not inside.
Absolutely. The lodge is not the building. It is every brother who's ever knelt at that altar and taken the same obligation that we all have. And those are the brothers that we're trying our best to help right now is that sense of brotherhood. And I can tell you I spent about 9 hours driving around the greater Baton Rouge area yesterday distributing some aid to some brothers, and I can tell you the look on their face when I pulled up was they were like, hey, a friend. It's good to see you, visit with them a little bit, give them some aid, and move on to the next brother. So the ties of fellowship and brotherly love are strong, and we're going to keep working with those brothers as long as they need our help.
Well, Jeff, I appreciate you taking some time with us here. I'm glad we're able to get this information out to all the Scottish Rite men who are listening and all the Masons, anybody who's listening to the podcast to let them know exactly what's happening down there. I'm sorry we didn't get you on this last month's podcast for my Masonic summer vacation, but at the time you were dealing with maybe a few other things. So I'm so glad to hear that you and your family are safe, and I'm glad to know we're working through finding all of our brothers and our widows and all those folks who've been displaced or affected by this storm. But I'm glad that we get the chance to shine and really show what this fraternity is all about in this moment. You heard Jeff say just a minute ago, the Northern Masonic jurisdiction kicked in $20,000 as a down payment. That is amazing. I know that once we get this out, we're going to have brothers from